Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. I am Depile, and I'm going to present on the Dzaleka mapping project, which is a project under Map Malawi. It is called OSM mapping for people living in protracted crisis. Map Malawi was founded early in December 2020 by myself, Ndabile Nku, and my partner, Zola Manyungwa. We're both Youth Mapper Leadership Fellows and also alumni from the African Drone and Data Academy. I am currently working as an instructor at the African Drone and Data Academy and also serving as a regional ambassador under Youth Mappers. And Zola is an instructor at the University of Malawi and also a graduate research assistant at West Virginia University. So as Map Malawi, our mission is to basically engage, create, and also work with youth-based communities in the creation of open source geospatial data whilst using other geospatial technologies as one of the means of contributing towards some of the local developmental and humanitarian issues that we face in our different communities. Okay, so why did we choose the Dzaleka refugee camp? I'm just going to give you a brief history of Dzaleka. So Dzaleka is one of the largest refugee camps here in Malawi. It was established by UNHCR in 1994 in response to some of the forcibly displaced people in different parts of Africa. And initially it was supposed to house 10,000 refugees. But as we're currently speaking, it is housing housing more than 43,000. And this in itself means that the resources that were already there are don't cater for all the needs because of the increase of population. So my partner and I decided to come up with a mapping project, and the project was funded by the Facebook Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team under the Community Impact Grants. And our aim was to just generate geospatial data that shows the provision of basic needs at the camp. So we basically, we're mapping out centers such as education centers, health centers, water points, and also education centers. How we did this was we integrated the use of drones, OpenStreetMap, and other geospatial technologies to map out our points of interest. The tools and technologies that we used to implement our project was the UAV. Some people call it drones. We opted for this because we're looking to acquire high resolution imagery. So we used the Mavic 2 Enterprise to acquire imagery that gave us resolutions of 3 centimeters per pixel. And for those that know the setup at Dzaleka camp, you understand the need of these high quality images because the setup is very cramped and it would be very hard to discern one building from another if we're mapping using the basic satellites that are given to us on OpenStreetMap. And we also use the hot tasking manager to coordinate our volunteers on OpenStreetMap. So we weren't just using one group of volunteers, we had several people. So the hot tasking manager helped us in coordinating our project. And for digitizing the features from the imagery, we used ID editor. So we introduced ID editor to the volunteers that were working on the project. And some mappers also opted to use GeoSM for mapping and also for the validation process. For collecting the different points of interest, such as the education or health points, we used Kobo Collect. So this is an open source tool. And we had 2 individuals from Dzaleka refugee camp that were trained to use this platform, and they went out to collect these points of interest and uploaded it onto Kobo Collect. And the last tool that we plan to use is QGIS. So we plan to do different analysis like accessibility analysis and also come up with the final visualization for our project. At this juncture, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Zola to take it from there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ndabile. So, as my partner has said, we're really youth-based and we feel very strongly about working with the youth. So, one of our goals is really just to strengthen the technological capabilities of the youth and encourage young professionals to creatively use geospatial technology to address different issues in their communities. And for this particular project, we are working with 2 youth-based groups. So under our organization, Map Malawi, our volunteers consist of alumni from the African Drone and Data Academy. So apart from them being alumni from the African Drone and Data Academy, they're also alumni from like different universities in Malawi. So we thought, okay, they're graduates. They also went through the drone technology courses, but sometimes we don't usually have opportunities as the youth to practice the different skills that we learn. So that's why we opted to have the youth volunteer for this project. The other group we're also working with is actually a youth group in the refugee camp itself, because sometimes projects go into communities and they don't even involve the people living in those communities. And we decided to involve the groups in that community, the youth in that community. And these youth are affiliated with a local tech lab called Technolab, and that's their contact right there. So we thought involving them also allows them to see themselves in the maps that are going to be created, and just being part of that process empowers them not only to map during this project, but also afterwards when we leave. So what have we done so far in terms of like community capacity building, and what is the impact? We've trained about 46, at this point it's probably even more, people on how to map using ID editor. As Ndapile said, that's the main thing we're using, like to digitize the buildings on OpenStreetMap. Two volunteers from Map Malawi and 25 people from Dzaleka were also introduced to drone technology. So the two volunteers from Map Malawi were actually part of the group that went to the camp to take the imagery together with Ndapile, and the 25 people from Dzaleka were also introduced to different aspects of drone technology, and they also had a chance to see the drones flying and maybe get an understanding of how that works. Two people, as my partner already said, were also introduced to Kobo Collect, and now it's safe to say that they're able to go around their own camp to collect this data. And we thought that that was also important because it brings about a better representation of the information that they're collecting, unlike just us as outsiders going in. So we thought it was very paramount for us to train people that are living within the camp itself. So far, the feedback that we've gotten from the youth themselves is that they've been enlightened and empowered to use and apply geospatial technology in addressing different issues. As much as we wanted to map out education centers, health centers, and the water points, they actually said, you know what, we might actually want to map out electrification and markets in the future. And the fact that we have now given them the skill to do it, they're more than willing to do it after this project. So where are we now? As Ndapila already mentioned, there are like just so many groups of people that came together to help us map this project. The OSM Africa community, we had hosted an OSM Africa mapathon one of the month, and everybody just came in to help us. The Dzaleka mapping community was also present at that event, and obviously our Map Malawi volunteers. And after that, the hot data interns also reached out, and that's the group that mainly helped us to validate our OSM mapping after that. So it's safe to say that now the project has been completely mapped and the data has been validated, thanks to all these groups that came together to help us. So far we have mapped 11,687 buildings on OpenStreetMap under this project. So the image on the left, it shows all the buildings under that boundary. So the boundary shows the boundary for the Dzaleka refugee camp. So the orange just shows all the buildings that have now been mapped. And on my right, the blue represents the buildings that have been mapped under this particular project from July 2021 to present. So you can see how much everybody just really came together to map out the buildings at the camp. So the different lessons that we have learned, I think we failed to mention that this is our first project under like our first OpenStreetMap project for myself and Dabile, and it's a learning process for us. We're still learning, and we'll be happy for people to reach out even after this presentation with suggestions and comments. So these are some of the lessons that we came up with. Collaboration makes the dream work, and as we've already said, there's so many groups that just came together to help us map, for us to get to a point where we finished mapping and validating. This project started during the pandemic, and we had to quickly adapt from trying to host mapathons in person. Everything now had to be online, and that was just a very tricky challenge as well. Community involvement and partnership are also very key to project success. As I already mentioned, just training the people that live within and around the community has made us learn more about the community that we were mapping, and also just to get more accurate information of where this water point is, what's the school name, and everything. I really appreciate the community being involved. We also realize that at the end of the day, the youth are so eager to learn. They're so eager to contribute to addressing challenges in their communities, in their countries, but sometimes they just really don't get the opportunity to do so, or sometimes they just get training and that's where it ends. Nobody really comes in to help them work on an actual project. So we hope that in the future we do engage more youth in different communities or even in the same community, so that as we go, they learn how to work on different projects and hopefully come up with their own projects in the future. And I think the last lesson is something that is very common throughout Africa and pretty much the rest of the world. It's just the high cost of technologies and the internet, and as well as training as well, the cost of it. So that's also another lesson, just to think about it when we're planning projects, to say, even if we're training communities, just to think about providing the different resources that the communities might actually need, just aside from the skill, in order for them to have their own projects after we leave. So what's next? At the moment, we're just trying to bring together all the data that we have collected and do the analysis. I think Dapile had mentioned it when she was presenting the slide. So that's where we are after the Kobo Collect participatory GIS exercise. We're now on the QGIS part of our project, where we're now trying to bring everything together to have our analysis and have the final map output and the visualization. Yeah, so right now we're just reaching out to different people just to also see the best way for us to visualize our work. Yeah, I think that's all we have for you today. Thank you.